everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to do the book recommendations tag, which is a tag that I have been seeing going around BookTube. The videos that I saw were from Jess from Peace Love Books and Tori from Novel Life, though I know many more of my friends have been doing this tag. I will do my best to find out who originated this tag, and I will leave their channel down in the description below. I will also leave all of the questions for this tag down below. But I really like this tag because it's basically asking questions about different books that you would recommend or books that have been recommended to you, but they're questions that I didn't quite expect from this kind of tag, so I'm just very excited to get on into this. So question one is a book you tell everyone is your favorite. So I do not have a top favorite contemporary romance. I have never been able to name a top favorite for that kind of romance, but when it comes to historical romance, you all should know at this point what my top favorite historical is. That is The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. I will never shut up about this book until the end of time. I have read this book twice now at this point, which I don't reread books a ton, so when I do, that should tell you something. This is just an incredible and hilarious marriage of convenience romance that also has Beauty and the Beast vibes, and we also have a beautiful step back. This book is just perfect to me, so when anybody asks me what my favorite romance is, I will usually say The Duchess Deal. Next up we have a book that is your guilty pleasure. Now, typically, I don't feel guilty about the books that I read. We all know that I read a lot of smutty romance, and you know what? I'm proud of that. I love that for myself. That is a form of self-care, the types of books that I read, you know? But I do read a lot of Jessa Kane novellas, and I think we can all agree that Jessa Kane novellas are not the highest art. And there is one novella in particular that I absolutely adore. I gave it 5 stars, and like everybody else I follow hated this novella. So that is An Angel for the Devil by Jessa Kane. This one is a romance between a billionaire and then this young woman who is from a very poor family. So this one, just like every Jessa Kane novella, has a pretty bonkers plot, but the heroine and her family agree to this plan that she will trade herself so that the hero doesn't evict her family from their apartment, because they are very poor and they are struggling to make the rent, make ends meet. And so that's what happens, and that's why a lot of people hate this novella, is because of that premise of like her family willing to trade her for free rent, basically. But you know what? This was a really great romance. It was a fun time. We love a grumpy billionaire hero and just a sweet heroine who, you know, breaks through his exterior, basically. It was just a fun time. What can I say? So I guess if I were to have a guilty pleasure, it would be this novella, but like I said, I don't feel guilty about the books that I read or the books that I enjoy, you know? Next up we have a book everyone loved but you hated. This one was difficult for me to come up with because when it comes to really popular books, it's very unusual for me to like hate a book that everybody loves. I usually enjoy popular books. I enjoy the kinds of books that everybody else loves. But this was a historical romance that I forgot to mention in one of my previous videos that I just did, where I was talking about historical romances that are overrated, underrated, and worth the hype. And I probably should have brought up this historical romance in that video, but I just forgot about it. I have not talked about this book since I read it, and that was back in like 2021, I believe. But this was a book that I really thought I was going to love. A lot of people that I follow on Romance BookTube who are historical romance girlies like myself have raved and raved about this romance and put this book in a lot of their recommendation videos. So I really thought I was gonna love it. And I gave it 2 stars, and that is My American Duchess by Eloisa James. By the way, I have since realized, because I have read or tried to read like 3 books by this author, her books are not for me. Her writing is not for me. I just don't jive with it. But this book This book got me though, because the first half, I was loving it. I was gonna give it 5 stars. This one is about Mary, who is an American heiress. She has broken a couple of engagements at this point. She's now on her 3rd engagement, and so she is going to do whatever she can to make this engagement actually go through, you know, actually marry this man. But Trent, who is a duke, he is the brother of the man that Mary is now engaged to be married to. Trent becomes obsessed with Mary. They fall for each other, and things just go on from there. So yeah, like I said, I loved the first half of this. I think Mary is a wonderful heroine. I really, really loved her character. I was really liking this angsty, forbidden romance that was going on. And then the second half got so boring. I was zoning out so many times while listening to this audiobook. And then our hero, like I said, the Duke of Trent, he just started being so mean to Mary for no good reason. Like, he had a reason, but it wasn't a good reason. And Mary is just such a wonderful character. She did not deserve that. And you know what? Trent did not deserve Mary. Mary deserved a better hero, in my opinion, and he just pissed me off. So for those reasons, I ended up giving this 2 stars, and I don't understand why so many people I follow have given this 5 stars and absolutely love this book. Question 4 is a book that you read the fastest. I decided to go with a book that I read very recently, that I read in a day. That has not happened for me in quite some time, just because of how my work-life balance is right now. I just don't have as much time as I used to sit down and read a book. But this book sucked me in. I could not help but read this in just a few hours. That is Ivan by Sophie Lark, book 1 in her Underworld series. This is a dark mafia romance series about Sloane, who is sent to kill Ivan, our hero. He catches her in the act, and he takes her as prisoner in his basement. And let's just say his methods of torture are very interesting. What's crazy about the fact that I read this in just a few hours is that there are no audiobooks for any of the books in this series. And so it definitely takes me a lot longer to read a book that doesn't have an audiobook to it. But I was immediately invested in both of these main characters and in their story and in the mafia plot and the romance plot. Like, it was all just so perfectly done and so well paced that I pretty much read this in one sitting. There was a point where, like, halfway through, I took a little bit of a break to take a nap, but then I got right back into it. And yeah, this was just absolutely amazing. I understand why so many of my friends love this romance. So good. Question 5 is a book you think deserves more hype, and I'm gonna have to go with The Duke Gets Even by Joanna Schutt. This is book 4 in her 5th Avenue Rebels series. For those of you guys that have been following me for quite some time, you know how much I love The Lady Gets Lucky, which is book 2, and I'm gonna get to that book in a minute, actually, because of another question in this video. But this book came out in February and completely blew me away. I was not prepared to love this book as much as I do. I love this book even more than The Lady Gets Lucky. And it just makes me so sad that not a lot of people, at least in the romance booktube realm, read historical romances in general, and so they're not reading Joanna Schutt. And I just think that that's a shame when this author is in her writing prime right now. Her historical romances are absolute perfection. They are steamy as hell. If you want some good spice, you have to read Joanna Schutt. Plus, her pen name is Mila Finelli, so if you have read those books and you really like her writing style, go ahead and read her historicals. I will say these books are not nearly as bonkers as her Mila Finelli books, but they're just incredible. They are perfection, and I wish that this book in particular got more hype because, wow, Nellie and Lockwood are absolute perfection. Their individual character developments, their romance as a whole, it's just beautifully done, and I cried while reading this. So yeah, I will not shut up about how amazing this book is. Question 6 is a book that is becoming a movie or TV show adaptation. I'm pretty much in the know when it comes to books that have, like, the rights have been purchased to be made into a movie or TV show, but nothing that has come out recently has really excited me, so I thought I would just bring up a book that the TV adaptation has recently come out that I'm very excited about, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think I'm gonna reread this book another time. I've read this book twice already. I actually read this book twice in the same year, which is like unheard of for me. Usually I wait a couple of years before rereading a book, but that's how much I loved this story that I had to reread it only like a few months after the first time. But oh my god, this book is amazing. It's incredible. I need to reread it again also so that I can like fully annotate this copy, and then I will go into the Amazon Prime adaptation. I believe most, if not all, of the season is out. I don't know if it's going to be a multiple season show. I haven't watched any of the episodes yet, but fun fact, one of my very best friends in the whole wide world has a small role in the TV show adaptation. I believe she's in episode 4, so I'm very, very excited to see her role and how that all turns out. Question 7 is a book you have reread the most. Now, I have not read any book more than twice in my life, so I'm just gonna go with one of my favorite romances that I have reread, and that is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. I don't talk about this book as much as you think I would because I love it so much. It's so good. Stella, our heroine, is on the autism spectrum, and I related so much to her character to the point where it made me start doing my own research about if I am on the spectrum, and at this point I firmly believe that I am, though I have not gone through the time and money of getting an official diagnosis. But for that reason alone, I love this book. But also, I love Michael, our hero. I love that this is a gender-bent pretty woman type of plot. Like, everything about this book to me is absolute perfection, and I can't wait to reread it again at some point. Question 8 is to recommend a book from a genre that you don't typically read. I decided to go with horror because that is definitely the genre that I have read the least amount of. However, I really enjoy horror novels. It's just that I'm hardly ever in the mood for one, especially these days. All I want to read is romance, you know? But a horror novel that has still stuck with me to this day since I read it in about 2018, like almost 6 years ago, is Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant. Mira Grant is a pen name that Shauna Maguire uses, by the way, so if you are a fan of her works, definitely check out this science fiction horror novel. It's absolutely spectacular. This is centering around several different characters. There was this voyage called the Itargatis that went out over the Mariana Trench and was filming a documentary about mermaids, and all of the crew on that ship went missing. And so now 7 years later, there is a new voyage going back out to the Mariana Trench to try to see what the hell happened. And wow, this book, there are scenes in this book that to this day live in my head rent-free. For instance, there is a scene where I believe 1 or 2 people are in one of those like submersibles that just go deep, 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 deep into the ocean. And we see that they are not alone down there, and it is incredibly terrifying. And I just thought it was so well written. I thought the audiobook narrator did a really great job, because I could have sworn that this book had multiple narrators, and it turns out that there was only one. So I highly recommend going the audiobook route as well. It's just crazy to me that all these years later, scenes from this book live in my head rent-free, so I think I'm gonna have to reread this one at some point for sure. Question 9 is a book that deserves all of the hype it gets. So I'm bringing up a book in a series that was already super duper hyped up in the booktube realm, and then Book Talk happened, and this book has reached just astronomical proportions, I feel like, in terms of how hyped up it is and how many people have read this book and this series at this point. And I still think that this book is totally worth all the hype, and that's gonna be A Court of Mist and Fury. Let's take a second and appreciate this stunning dust jacket. Oh my god. And then on the back, look, oh my god, we have Amren and Moore and Asriel and Cassian. Ugh, I can't. This dust jacket is from the Dusty Shop, by the way. I truly think that this book in particular revolutionized the fantasy romance genre. I know that's a very big thing to say, but I truly believe that with my heart and soul. And I don't know if there will ever be a fantasy romance as iconic as Feyre and Rhysand's romance in this book. Everything about this is perfection, and I've only read this book twice, but I have so many friends who have read this book over and over and over again, and it's their favorite book of all time, and I totally understand why. Number 10 is a book you usually recommend, and that is going to be The Lady Gets Lucky by Joanna Shupe, book 2 in the same series that The Duke Gets Even is a part of. Ever since I read this in November of 2021, I have not shut up about how amazing this historical romance is. This is a lessons in seduction romance between Kit and Alice, who is trying her best to find a husband so that she can get out from under her abusive mom. And oh my god, Kit is just an incredible, swoony hero. I love him so much. Like I've said about Joanna Shupe already, she serves the steam and the spice, and the lessons in seduction are just perfectly done in this book. So this is a book that I usually recommend to people who are trying to get into historical romance. I think Gilded Age romances are a good era to go with because that's around the 1890s into the early 1900s. So that wasn't so long ago like other historical romances that you will find. And like I said, this romance is just so beautiful and swoony, and every single person I have recommended this book to has at least given it 4 stars, so that should really tell you something. Question 11 is a book that has your favorite characters. That is absolutely going to be the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. Once again, let's look at this stunning Dusty Shop dust jacket, and look at the glass castle. Ugh, absolutely obsessed. Like, I could just sit and stare at these dust jackets forever. But this is still ultimately my favorite Sarah J. Maas series, and it's because of the characters. Not only do you have Aelin and Rowan, but I adore Lysandra and Manon with my whole heart. You have Aedion, you have Nesrin and Sartok, and Dorian and Kale and Yrene. I could just go on and on and on about this amazing crew of characters and their relationships with each other. Oh my god, how could I forget Elide and Lorcan? One of my favorite romances in this series. There's just so many amazing characters to talk about, and I will always have a stronger emotional connection to these characters than I do to the ACOTAR crew, though I love them as well. But there is just something about these characters and their story that will always mean so much to me and will always have a special place in my heart. Question 12 is a book you wish you could live in. This was a hard question for me to come up with an answer with at first because I could never see myself living in a fantasy world of any kind, to be real, because honestly, I don't know that I would survive in that kind of world all that well unless I was a magic wielder or something. But I would love to live in the Mead Mishap world that Kimberly Lemming has created. These are incredible fantasy rom-coms if you don't know. So this is a world where we have a ton of hot dudes who are demons, they are animal shifters, and women are in short supply. And so all of these men are desperate to find their mates, and I feel like I'd have a wonderful time here. I'd probably find the most wonderful husband ever, honestly, truly. And I would also have the most iconic best friend ever in Alexis, the Talking Sword. If you have read this series, you know who I'm talking about. She's iconic, she's a menace to society, she's absolutely hilarious, and I love her with my heart and soul. So I just feel like I would have the best life ever if I lived in this world. Question 13 is a book you thought you would hate that you ended up loving, and this was a very easy question for me to come up with an answer for. That is going to be Vicious by LJ Shen. The reason why I thought I was going to hate this book is because I had never read a bully romance before, and I knew going into this that Vicious, our hero, is a pretty terrible bully to Amelia, the heroine. And because I was bullied when I was younger, I really thought I was going to despise this book. And the way that I became so invested in their story within like the first chapter is honestly laughable because of how much I thought I was gonna hate it, you know? And the way that LJ Shen wrote Vicious's redemption arc, like his whole character arc, I just thought was so well written. There's also some quality hate sex in this, and his redemption arc was very well done as well. So you know what? Now that I'm talking about it, I need to reread this book very soon. Next up, we have question 14 is a book that made you cry. This was also an easy question for me to come up with an answer for. That is Behind the Bars by Brittany Cherry. I have talked about this book so much on my channel ever since I read it back in, I believe, August of last year. I featured this in my video all about books that made me cry, so I will link that up in the cards above. But this is a friends to lovers, second chance romance between Jasmine and Eli. There is a lot of bullying involved in this, by the way, towards the beginning. Just be aware of that. There's also death on page. That is kind of violent murder, not gonna lie. And I sobbed several times while reading this book. It's stunning, it's beautiful. I need to read more by Brittany Cherry. What can I say? And finally, we have question 15, a book you wish you could read for the first time again. Now, with most books that I go back and reread, I usually pick up more from the story, just more details, you know, things like that when I'm rereading it. So in that way, I don't really regret not being able to read a book for the first time again, but there is one book in particular that when I reread it, I didn't love it quite as much as I did the first time. So that's going to be Queen of Shadows, which is book 4 in the Throne of Glass series. I don't want to dig out my copy in my shelves right now, so we're just gonna hold out Throne of Glass. But that is a book that in the last 100 pages or so, we know this is Sarah J. Maas's MO, but in the last 100 pages or so, we've got crazy plot twists. We've got amazing battle scenes. Crazy shit is going down. And the first time I read that book, I was so blown away. I didn't know what to do with myself. I actually vlogged my experience reading this series for the first time. So I'll link that playlist up in the cards above if you want to see my reaction to Queen of Shadows specifically, because I'm literally just sitting in front of the camera, speechless. I am just in awe. And when I reread this series this past year, I still loved Queen of Shadows. I still think it's a toss-up between Queen of Shadows and Empire of Storms, like what my favorite book of the series is. I still ultimately think it is my favorite book of the series, but because I knew what plot twists were coming and I knew what battles were coming, I wasn't, you know, quite as blown away by it, unfortunately. So if there is one book that I wish I could read for the first time, it's going to be Queen of Shadows. So that is going to be it for this book recommendations tag. Like I said, I will leave all the questions down below, so feel free to do this tag yourselves. And I would also love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of my answers for these questions, or if you want to answer these questions yourselves. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!